What's the dumbest rule your school ever enforced? Can't be standing around in groups more than 4, gang mentality. Locked the only boys' bathroom because someone wrote on the wall in Sharpie. It wasn't even anything rude or inappropriate either. It was just the word, hi, or something like that. Didn't unlock the door until one boy wet himself and parents threatened to sue. Not really a rule, but the toilet paper holders are outside of the stalls on a wall. So you have to calculate before taking a shit how much you need and hope that it was enough. Banned all backpacks/bags on campus. Students were expected to somehow carry everything they needed in hand. This was especially challenging if you had a non-ideal locker placement. I got a suspension for holding a stick. The phone call with my mom went something like this, only slightly dramatized. School, Mrs. DeQueck, your son has been suspended. Mom, oh my goodness, what did he do? S, he was holding a stick. M, did he hit someone with it? S, no. He was just holding it. M, did he threaten to hit someone with it? S, no, just held it. M, did he refuse to put it down when you asked? S, no, he was very cooperative. M, so, what did he do wrong? S, he held a stick. M, and I should be upset about that? S, absolutely, you know we have a zero-tolerance policy. M, right, well, I'll talk with him. As you might guess, I did not get in trouble at home. We suddenly one day weren't allowed to stand in circles during recess because, and I quote, we could be dealing drugs. I will add that for the years prior we had been standing in circles no problem. Next recess, we stood in a triangle, cue principal going apes hit. Next day we stood in a square, principal kept us inside for a week. And threatened us all with detentions if we did it again, etc. I believe their idea was open-ended circles so they could see what we were doing. Still stupid. No farting in class. They would say, if you need to fart then go to the toilet, but then 9 times out of 10 if you asked to go to the toilet they'd say no. Zero tolerance. Just means that if someone starts a fight with you, you fight back as hard as you can. You're going to get suspended for defending yourself anyway, might as well make it worthwhile. You have to wear your tie all the way home. Some sad bastard teachers would stand on the main road away from the school and try to hand out detentions in presumably their own time. In grade school, we weren't allowed to play on the playground equipment when it snowed. Eventually, we weren't allowed to play with snow or even go near it. I got in trouble for sitting in snow. This was in Minnesota where it snows half the year. Recess basically consisted of milling around the blacktop for 30 minutes. My friend is an administrator at a private school in NJ and the faculty has to sign in and out of the bathroom using Google Sheets. 9 a.m., 10 minutes, Monday to Friday. When I was in junior school, UK boarding school in the 80s, we were not allowed to say okay as it was considered slang and not befitting the young ladies and gentlemen that we should aspire to be. For context, junior school covered ages 5 to 13. We also had to have a comb and a handkerchief on us at all times. On top of that, we weren't allowed to have our hands in our pockets because it looks slovenly. Don't damage school property sounds reasonable enough until you get detention for staining a chair after suddenly getting your period. Playing cards at lunch was prohibited because it promoted gambling. No slow dances at the prom. No fighting, enforced by punishing the kids who were getting hit. We weren't allowed to wear thongs. I don't know how they caught people who did TBH. It wasn't really the rule that was dumb but the reason for it. In my last year of high school, the school issued a rule that all students had to wear student IDs. If you didn't, you had to immediately go and pay for another ID. While you can see how many students may have saw this a way to skip class, the reason for this was the school shootings that happened the previous year. The reasoning was that it would be easier to spot who is a student and who is not a student to then see who has malicious intent, except that most shooters were students, so. No beads. Apparently they thought beaded jewelry was gang-related. We once had a rule that we could only go to the bathroom during class. Not in the breaks. Only during class. I was wearing a regulation uniform jacket in a classroom during winter that had no heating. The teacher demanded I remove my jacket and I refused because I was cold. She sent me to the headmistress. Rule, no duct tape on clothing. Reason, some girls thought they could get past the no ripped jeans rule by covering the tears with duct tape. It became a fad and everyone started doing it so it got banned. A kid in my AP literature class found a loophole and made an entire outfit out of red and black duct tape. I mean shorts, a t-shirt and a jacket and shoes. When the school tried to suspend him they couldn't because the rule was no duct tape on clothes, it said nothing about clothes made out of duct tape. He won the argument and even wore the outfit a few more times to say, fuck you, to the school and principals LOL. Really though, to answer a regularly asked question, ripped jeans were an issue because they made the school look trashy, not cause they showed skin. However, there were many other rules to enforce no excessive skin be shown. We would get suspended for rips in our clothes and also for duct tape on clothes, both for the same reason. It was trashy, LMAO. Different staircases for boys and girls. I believe this awkwardness could be prevented if there wasn't such an obvious separation between the genders. One particular professor at my university would lock the door a minute after class began. If you had to leave to go to the bathroom, you couldn't get back in. Somehow this ancient fossil is still teaching and pulling similar shit. Dildos were banned. The school never thought they would have to print those words. You would think it was a given. Until a senior bought 100 dildos and snuck them around the school every day for 2 weeks straight. My school made it compulsory to wear uniform in online classes. My high school decided to ban women's athletic shorts one day, which was ridiculous for many reasons. The next day every girl showed up in athletic shorts and the rule was removed by second block. No leaving the dorm unless it's for a fire alarm. I went to boarding school from the age of 7. That rule meant we couldn't get out of our dormitory to have a wee in the night. We had a plastic tub one of the girls brought in and went in that. Then we had to smuggle the tub to the bathroom in the morning without matron seeing. Stupid bloody rule. Also, this was 80s, early 90s, Southern England. Our punishments were pretty awful, but I survived. We all did. I'm still in touch with some of the girls I boarded with back then. We have our scars, but we're a tough lot. Second. Dumbest rule, zero tolerance for fighting. This meant both the kid who started the fight and the kid who got beat on were both suspended. If the kid who got beat on just took it, he was just sent home for the rest of the day. If he dared to fight back, he was suspended for a week, just like the kid who started the fight. Here's the truly stupid part, the school administrators couldn't explain how this led to more brutal fights. I got detention for pooping more than 10 minutes, but I have served stomach cramps and I asked why and they had no answer. My friend nearly got suspended for wearing a trench coat. It was the late 90s, probably didn't help that he had long hair, was shy, and weird. Students must keep their hair short. So many. You weren't allowed to wear a coat or a backpack, always freezing with tons of books, no card games at all, 5 minutes between classes, sprawling one-story building barely leaves time to pee. Went to school during the time where health and safety suddenly started going crazy. They introduced a no contact under any circumstances rule. No touching another person. We were like 6 or 7 years old. Suddenly one day not only is tag suddenly illegal, but they actually enforced it. I remember one day like 70% of the school's population was pulled off of the playground and made to sit on the floor in the hall, for the crime of just playing the games that children play. Guys were free to wear pants in cold days, but girls had to wear a skirt no matter how cold it was. The new principal made a morning roundup rule where anyone arriving to class after the last bell had to go to the cafeteria and listen to a lecture about not being late for class. This took about an extra 15 minutes, making the students even more late to class than they would have otherwise been. Needless to say, everyone hated it, even the teachers. That principal didn't last long. Elementary school principal banned talking at lunch. If you were caught talking or even signing to someone, you had to go sit by yourself on a folding chair with no table. There was once my mom came to eat lunch with my older sister and I. The principal was like, "Oh, you should go eat out in the hallway with your daughters," and she was like, "Nah, I'm gonna sit here with my daughter and her friends and talk to them and enjoy their presence." Usually if a parent came for lunch, the student could invite one friend to join, unless you had siblings. Then it was too many people, so you couldn't invite a friend. Anyway, one of my older sister's friends whispered to my mom that she was going to move so she wouldn't get in trouble for talking. This was a 9-year-old. They banned plain red and plain blue shirts. I was sent to the principal in elementary school for getting a drink of water out of line, as in we walked down the hall in a formation and we had designated water drinking stops. To this day I still remember the principal asking angrily, "Well, what if everyone started getting water without permission?" And I still don't have an answer. Don't play on the golf course. Our tiny community got a burst of cash in the 70s due to having mineral rights on land with oil. It was amazing some of the things we had access to for a school in the plains in Montana: computer lab, ceramics, photography, and a freaking laser. They also bought the grade school a miniature golf course in the center of the playground. A majority of the playground was concrete squirrels, turtles, and a whale. These looked like a lot of fun to play on for a kid. We couldn't touch them. We couldn't get near them. We couldn't land our Star Wars figures on them, incorporate them in our games in any way, or even walk near them when running from someone playing tag. Once in PE we got out the clubs and played a few rounds in my entire time in school. Other classes never even got that. After about 30 years, during a student cleanup, they got some of the upper-level high school kids to take hammers to them and pulverize them. Don't let your underwear show. This was directed at the girls when Madonna was in fashion. One school official went to war on visible bra straps. While no girls even attempted copying Madonna, this official was making a preemptive attack. She made announcements and would bust girls in the halls. About this time the varsity boys basketball team got new uniforms. Rather than spend money on the other teams, their old uniforms were given to the junior varsity girls team. Jerseys with huge arm and neck holes made for 17-year-old boys were now being worn by 15-year-old girls. Girls that were as active as possible and in public. If they posed for a picture, you could almost not see their bras. While playing, the front of the jerseys flopped from side to side. At least one cup would be visible at any time. Suddenly girls basketball got a lot more popular. We were not allowed to put our coats on until we were outside. During winter when we would have a storm, we had to go outside in the rain to put our coats on or face receiving a detention if we put them on in the corridor. Many years ago when The Simpsons first came out, my school banned Bart Simpson t-shirts that said, "Underachiever." It just sent the wrong message to students. So I wore my, "I'm Bart Simpson, who the hell are you," t-shirt instead. Until they banned that one too. I got in trouble for humming to myself in the bathroom and told I was disturbing another class. If you were cold you had to buy a school jacket which were $30. Students and their parents had a $%*ing field day with this rule. No body armor of any kind. The fuck was we gonna get body armor? Most of us barely could afford to go to school. The fact that this was a rule also makes me wonder what the fuck happened to make them institute this. If you throw snowballs, you get a 1-day suspension. The first long weekend after a snowfall everyone would throw snowballs to get an additional day added to the long weekend. After September 11th, my school instituted a zero-tolerance policy on bullying and violence. What 9/11 had to do with bullying, I don't know. Anyways, Halloween 2001, I dressed up as the guy from Clockwork Orange. He carries a cane around. The principal pulled me aside, told me walking around with a cane could be a weapon, therefore just walking with it is an act of violence, and suspended me for a couple of days, telling me that after September 11th, we don't mess around with that kind of stuff. And #X200B. My school had 3 staircases along a very long corridor. We were banned from using the middle staircase because it got overcrowded. The ban was lifted once they realized it only made the other 2 staircases just as crowded. No hot drinks. Rumor said it was because the principal burned himself while drinking something so he banned it. Girls must have a male escort them to prom as their date. If your date bails, you can't enter. We were an all-girls school. Many of us had 0 guy friends. Finding dates was hard. I remember one year a girl's boyfriend dumped her when everyone was starting to show up for photos. She showed up at the venue, mascara running, begging the principal to let her go in. Principal wouldn't let her. One of the senior homeroom teachers ended up calling her nephew and said, "I need you to put on your suit and get here ASAP." He showed up with flowers and everything. So it was salvageable but totally avoidable. The worst part? It wasn't always a rule until one year a group of girls went as friends and kept stealing other people's dates. Way to punish everyone forever because of one group of bitches. A kid went to the hospital after falling from a wall. Then the school painted yellow lines around the school as a border which the kids weren't allowed to cross. So the teachers had to stand guard and make sure no one crossed it. Yo-yos. Somehow it became a thing in high school and, well, eventually they got banned. We were not allowed to have facial hair at all. To the point where the principal would walk around during lunch with razors and shaving cream and do stubble checks. Absolutely ridiculous, and he would send tons of us to the bathrooms to shave during lunch, no matter how small the stubble was. Women's thighs are not allowed to touch a chair. I got Saturday school for missing a day of classes when I was 16. Seems reasonable, except I missed to go complete my US citizenship and officially become a citizen alongside my mom. It took us 12 years to go through the legal process, BTW. Whole other issue. I had a note from my mother as well as a signed official federal form they give you to explain to school/employers why you were absent. Apparently the only acceptable absence excuse was illness. I got punished for becoming a citizen woman facepalming. I went to school in the 90s and the school banned us from having pagers. My high school had coordinates, not a uniform. But they stopped selling the shorts like a decade before I started there. So me and a bunch of buddies tracked down used pairs and started wearing them. Next year, shorts were banned outright. So me and a bunch of buddies on the rugby team started wearing skirts, because the rules said skirts were acceptable, but didn't specify gender. So you had a bunch of guys with hairy legs walking around in skirts. We deliberately hiked up a little to show some thigh. Shorts were allowed again in a week. My school banned water bottles. A water drinking fad started at my school, mostly among girls, and soon all of them were walking around carrying plastic purified water bottles from the major brands. They all wanted to look health conscious and cool. But then it became a matter of showing off who can be the most healthy and hydrated, so having a mere 750 milliliters bottle wasn't enough anymore. So the girls began bringing larger and larger water bottles and jugs to school to outshine one another. Eventually they began carrying 5L plastic jugs with them all over the school grounds. It looked silly. Eventually the guys jumped on board the fad and brought even larger water containers to school. One guy brought a baggage trolley to school on which he transported a 20L industrial water dispenser bottle. And NBSP. At this point the principal had had enough. It was a posh, image-conscious school with fancy uniforms and he didn't like seeing the students all lugging around big plastic jugs of water, looking like homeless people. So he banned any and all water bottles from school and told the students to drink water from the bathroom taps and other drinking fountains. This is dumb because drinking water regularly is healthy. He could have simply banned all bottles over 750 milliliters and could have simply told us to keep the bottles hidden away in our bags and out of sight when walking around between classes. No unnatural hair colors. Except for Lily, who dyed her hair the school color, maroon. It was dark enough to argue it was a weird red/brown, but it was clearly maroon and I think she got away with it because it was school spirit. You had to have black shoelaces. No dark blue, no white, no gray. Only black. There was also the rule your tie had to be a minimum length. So sometimes one of the assistant head teachers would come in and measure the length of your tie with a ruler. You had to wear your ID around your neck on a rope thing. Then the choking started. In high school, the supervisor told the prefects and head girls to break up girls hugging in the hallways that I went to an only girls school and teachers discouraged girls from hugging each other. Apparently they thought that it encouraged lesbianism. SMH. In the late 90s in my elementary school Pokemon cards were banned. Candy canes were outlawed because you could sharpen them to a point and use them as a shiv. I went to school in rural Washington. We definitely weren't somewhere that shankings were to be expected. We weren't allowed to have personal drinks in classroom unless we had doctor's note. Couldn't shit in the potted plants right outside the cafeteria door. Stupid fascists. Prom was a mandatory lockdown for the night in order to avoid students going to parties after prom. Prom was held at various house parties across town instead. Not being allowed to wear hoodies/jackets or sweaters that lacked the official school logo. I was a high school teacher for several years, both buildings I worked in were freezing, and having admin pull students out of my classroom during a 50-minute period and giving them detention instead of letting them learn is cruel and completely unnecessary, in my opinion. If found with socks lower than the knees, warning, 3 warnings, detention. Needless to say I got a couple of detentions. Closing boys' toilets, because some cunt was stealing toilet paper. When school staff announced this stupid rule, some students actually threatened to shit on the tables then. Skirt had to be a certain length. That's not the dumb part. If a teacher thought it was too short you had to kneel so they could see where the hem came to on your legs. Was this a Christian private school where old male teachers were making middle school girls kneel on the floor to check their skirt length? Why, yes it was. I never wore skirts, so I was spared, but God, I hated that school. At the end of the school day, buses were not allowed to depart until the flag was lowered on the flagpole outside the main entrance and properly stowed. I went to a high school for smart kids. My senior year, they instituted a rule to crack down on kids cutting class. Asterisk if you're 45 minutes or more late to class, 90-minute blocks, it's an absence, otherwise it's a tardy. Asterisk if you get 3 tardies, that is 1 unexcused absence. Asterisk if you get 20 unexcused absences, you automatically fail the class. So my friend and I figured out the exact day that we could stop coming to first period English on time, as long as we got there within 45 minutes of it starting, and end the year with 19 absences. Of course we went to a school for nerds, so instead of using the time to do drugs and smoke cigarettes, we played tennis. The teacher would ask why we always showed up sweaty and late and we'd just laugh it off. We had an up staircase and a down staircase. You could only go up the up staircase and only go down the down staircase. If you were caught going the wrong direction on either staircase, you would get some kind of warning/strike. I will admit that it did help from keeping the stairs get congested in between classes, but it was a huge pain in the ass if you had a class right next to the up staircase and had to go downstairs for your next class, because the down staircase was way at the other end of the floor, so you basically had to book it to your next class. Another stupid rule was only having 3 minutes in between classes. I went to a huge high school, so you basically had to speed walk or jog to classes that were far. And with the whole staircase issue mentioned above, it resulted in people being late for class constantly. Rubik's Cubes were banned. After September 11th they made us wear school IDs on our shirt or hanging from a lanyard around the neck. For some reason they decided it would be smart to also put each student's medical history on the back. Mine just had "nosebleeds" written in cursive. They installed vending machines and later banned pocket change, so if you wanted anything from the machine you had to get it in the morning before classes started, or just get it cheaper in the shop next to the school. My primary school had this weird obsession with safety. When we played dodgeball the boys had to throw with their non-dominant hand while the girls got to throw full force. And we could get detention for going where the teachers couldn't see us. But the worst rule by far was that we weren't allowed to run on the playground. I'll never forget the time my teacher literally said, "The playground is no place to run." The dumbest one I suffered was in the early 90s. My junior high banned all jackets and jacket-like clothing in class because there was a story about how some kids in an inner-city school had brought guns to class in starter jackets. Keep in mind that my junior high school was in a medium-sized college town, not anywhere with an actual gang problem. The school also had a terrible climate control system and was always cold. The rule was really absurd. You couldn't wear jackets or hoodies, but pullover hoodless sweatshirts were okay, as were sweaters. The rule was finally revoked after we had a fire alarm incident in the middle of February that had the whole school standing outside for 45 minutes in freezing weather while the fire department checked for whatever had set off the alarm. No running shoes on the new gym floor. Playing floor hockey barefoot is painful. Clown face. We had to sign a waiver before prom stating we wouldn't dance dirty. No one went to prom. No spaghetti straps. This was enforced from kindergarten to the end of elementary school. It was a year-long battle. It showed that the administration wasn't all that smart in wording rules. First was, no gang clothing. Not one person admitted it was for a gang. People just happened to like a certain team. Second was, no hats, unless religious. You would have never guessed that so many became religious overnight. Finally, no head coverings. That one finally stuck, but it wasn't without issue. Try telling the valedictorian that her head covering wasn't allowed. P.S. Everyone liked her, and we all had her back when it came time. At my kids' elementary school students had to smile while walking in the hall. Clear liquids only. Some kid brought in Gatorade mixed with alcohol of some sort, so in effort to combat it afterwards they wanted us to only drink clear liquids out of clear containers. As if vodka and white rum don't exist. Person shrugging. Not a school rule, but the school had to officially announce it to the student body. The McDonald's across the street made a "no unaccompanied minors" rule because a couple kids had trashed the place one day after school. Late 90s. Secondary school, 13 to 16-year-olds mostly. Implementing school socks as part of the uniform midway through the year. Even plain white socks were not allowed. Those blasted things weren't all that durable either. Also, all students who were enrolling in that particular year, I can't remember if it was a male-only policy or not, had to at least have a basic certificate to prove that you could swim. Also strong-armed into attending some outdoor adventure camp thing. Fuck you, Mr. Jafar. Makes me wonder if you were getting kickbacks from all these things. No satanic drawings. What qualified as satanic was anything the teachers or faculty deemed as such, including the Star of David. We lived in dorms when I was in high school because it was in a very secluded place. My friend often joked how we lived like prisoners, because we can't leave the campus grounds even after school unless we get the permission of like 10 people, we eat, sleep and study at very specific hours, curfew is at 7 p.m., and we weren't allowed to have smartphones like ever, or any phone with a camera. Every single one of us had a different variation of a Nokia 3310. There was an all-girls school near my house where they had a rule about what color underwear you had to wear and would have the girls stand on the stairs so they could check by looking up their skirts. I think that stopped in the late 90s. My buddy tried to walk away from a fight, and got kicked from behind, which knocked him out. Because we had a no-tolerance rule for fighting, he got expelled. You can only use 3 squares of TP. In elementary school there was a rule that you were not allowed to sit against the walls of the building. Let's say you're not feeling well or you're exhausted and you just wanted to relax with your back to a wall, nope, can't do it. Go sit in the bark, on the cement, or in the grass. The walls were some of the only shady areas on one of the playgrounds. They gave since changed that rule. Oh, another one was that 2 students from one class were not allowed to go to the bathroom at the same time. You had to wait until the other person came back. I can't tell you how many first and second graders peed their pants because of this rule. If you turn off your camera, without filling out a ton paperwork first, in online class, the teacher will yell at you. I don't have any teachers who don't lose their crap about it on the regular. One time, my friend turned off his camera for less than a minute to get some water. When he came back, his grade had been reduced from A to B+. We weren't allowed to have "Can You Feel the Love Tonight" from The Lion King as our homecoming dance theme because it had the words "feel" and "love" in the title. So fucking stupid. No shorts allowed between some day in October and some day in usually March/April, maybe May even. It was a K-8 school. We live in a 4-season area. It's hot in the summer, cooler in the fall/spring, and can sometimes snow but is usually just cold during the winter. It was a stupid rule. Zero tolerance policy. Students were expected to just walk away without ever hitting back. They eventually let up a bit on the rule after multiple parents threatened to sue, and the school would usually just separate the kids' classes, and they eventually either ran out of ways to separate kids or it just became too much of a hassle. A school in my city banned white t-shirts because they thought kids were being racist. In reality it was because they just beat a rival school in the city who wore all white to the biggest high school football game that year. Mandatory 10-day suspension for anyone involved in a fight, regardless of details. So basically, a bully could sucker punch you out of nowhere, you fall to the ground bleeding, and get the same 10-day suspension as he does. The amount of people who got screwed out of extracurricular activities and such because someone knew that if they just hit them they could ruin their entire life was ridiculous. It was a stupid rule, and I hope they've wisened up to its abuse in the years since, but being a public school, I highly doubt it. Textbook checkouts were an absolute shit show. They were assigned entirely by number and condition. They were not assigned to a specific student. As long as you turned in a textbook at the end of the year and the textbook number was on the list, that was the first step to being okay. The second step was condition. The textbooks were graded as new, good, fair, and poor. If the book was returned in a lesser condition than when it was checked out, you had to pay for a new textbook. This included condition changes from new to good, yet we almost never got new textbooks. The ones we had were usually around 10 years old, so they went through at least 3 condition changes over their lifespan. It was pure extortion. You had to pay for the textbook at the end of the year, and if you didn't, they'd keep you from advancing. So that sucks, right? That compounded with another stupid rule we had. Lockers were not allowed to be locked. In fact, our lockers didn't even have a latch, they were just painted wood doors that were really just poorly installed flaps that would hang open. This was ultimately so the cops could check everyone's lockers for drugs, but it led to another issue: stolen textbooks. So the textbooks were generally falling apart, and we were expected to both keep them with us for class and also bring them home with us for homework. We also didn't want them stolen, so most students kept them in their backpacks constantly. For every class. This was a rural school, too, so most students had a decent walk home even from bus stops. Mine was about a mile. Point being, the textbooks were abused, as were our backs and backpacks. So you start with a poor condition textbook and add the extra wear and tear, and it's just a matter of time before the cover rips off. So those with shit textbooks would just grab one from whatever exposed locker had one. As long as the student was in the same class as you, it's fair game. In case you were wondering where the money went, it went into new awnings every year for the exterior doorways and into our famously bad football team. Our girls' teams were a bunch of champions and never got any respect for it. The school only cared about our shitty football team. They would go entire seasons without a single win.